light machines. A guy called Brian Gislin, who was a Canadian artist, designed one in the 1960s, for instance. But as far as I'm aware, the lucid light device, known as Lucia, is the only one that's actually been designed from the bottom up by neurologists and psychologists. In other words, it's designed to work with the brain. So in other words, they know what they want the light to do within the brain neurologically. So I was invited over, and when I arrived, I was introduced to Engelbert, and we had a chat. And then sitting in the corner was the lucid light device. And they said, "We're going to, if you're interested, we're going to give you the strongest session, a 15-minute session with it, just to see what you think." Now, I'm somebody that I'm fairly grounded, and extraordinary claims need extraordinary proofs as far as I'm concerned. You know, I'm not somebody that just has flights of fancy on these things. I want to do the science, and if the science doesn't fit, I need to find alternatives. But effectively, I'm trying to do the science. And it's one of the things I say to people. You read my books, every single thing I say is reference to academic papers, articles, other books, but I never just put something in there without giving you the opportunity to check that my facts are correct. So it's quite an important point for me. So I sit down in front of the lucid light device, and I'm told to close my eyes, and the light starts. And all I can see through my closed eyes is flickering light. It's the flicker effect. It's something that sometimes, probably, if you've ever been driving along in a car and there's high trees and there's the sun behind, you get this kind of flicker effect. And the flicker effect is known to stimulate the brain in curious ways. So I'm having this flickering effect, and nothing's happening. And I'm sitting here, and I get into about 2 or 3 minutes in, and I'm thinking, this is going to be really embarrassing. I'm either going to have to pretend something happened, or I'm just going to be truthful with them, but it didn't work for me. Suddenly, after about 3 or 4 minutes, bang, it happened. In my right visual field was an explosion of blue light. And it's the only thing, is if somebody had thrown a paint of blue light across my visual field. Suddenly, from the left-hand side came red, and the two of them mingled in the middle, like paint moving around and shimmering. And then it kind of fractionalized into kind of diamond shapes and things, and they began to spin. And they turned into what was a tunnel. Now, immediately, because I'm a professional member of the International Association of Near-Death Studies, I know the tunnel effect. And it was the tunnel effect that was described by people when they have near-death experiences. And I feel like I'm being pulled down a tunnel. Then my eyes start to vibrate in my head, and I started to get concerned. And I turned round to Dirk, the neurologist, and I said, "Is this all right?" And he said, "Yes. What's happened now? Your eyes have now encoded the light, and they're reacting to it. But it's nothing to worry about." Now, as all these things are spinning around me, in my extreme right visual field, there's something moving. Now, again, as I mentioned, I get migraine. And anybody who gets classical migraine will recognize what I'm going to describe now. When you have classical migraine, you have things called scotomas. They're kind of breakdowns of your visual field, like little zigzags. This is what was happening in my extreme right visual field. There was something moving. I asked Engelbert and Dirk whether I could look at it, because it would mean taking my eyes away from the flashing light. And they said, "Yes, you can, because your brain has now encoded the flashing light. So just look away." So I looked down, and as I looked down, what I saw I could not believe. And even now, every time I describe this, I find it uncanny and unbelievable. I was looking down at the surface of a planet. I was probably about 30 or 40 miles up, and I was flying. My chair was flying along in space, overlooking this planet. The planet's surface was made up of white lights going in straight lines to the edge of the planet, where a blue light was flickering. There were also white lights crossing like a huge checkerboard of light. But something else I noticed that I've never really mentioned in interviews before, but I now understand more about this. I could see filaments of light linking everything. These kind of tiny filaments coming off the main filaments. I couldn't believe it. I recall grabbing hold of the side of the chair because I was so scared. Now, I have to admit, I lost my nerve, and I said, can you please turn it off? And they turned it off, and the vision just went. It just switched off, as if it had literally been switched off. Now, I then spoke a few days, I'll just jump ahead now. A few days later, I spoke to another friend of mine who's an Australian expert on out-of-the-body experiences by the name of Robert Bruce. And I described this to Robert. I was interviewing him for another radio program, and Robert turned around and said, look at the back cover of my book, Astral Travel. And I did. And he said, is that what you saw? And I said, yes, exactly what I saw. Isn't that amazing? He said, no, not really. Many people see it. It's called astral plane. I saw the astral plane. So suddenly, my whole opinion about out-of-the-body experiences, how they function, how they work, had changed. I was halfway through my book on out-of-the-body experiences at that time. And I rewrote the whole book based upon this experience. Because suddenly, I realized that the out-of-the-body experience is a real sensation. It really does happen. My book then was trying to explain the science of what happens. What is happening in the brain? How does the brain stimulate these things? But things then became stranger. Around about 20 minutes afterwards, I was having a conversation with Winkler and Procol and the other people in the room, and suddenly something started to happen really odd. I felt a sensation that something was moving in the center of my forehead. It was like a very tiny animal moving. And the only equivalent I can use this is sometimes when you see photographs or when you see X-ray of an egg with a snake in it, where the snake is moving around inside the egg, it was just like that. And it kept moving, and then it would stop, and then it would move again. I didn't mention this to my associates, and it went on all through the night. I then went to bed, and I had the most vivid dreams I've ever had in my life. They were three-dimensional, they were powerful, they were vivid in color and strength. And every time I woke up, there was this bzz, bzz sensation in the middle of my head. I then started checking up on this, and I was aware enough of esoteric lore to know the concept of the Anu chakra and the third eye. That machine had opened my third eye. It had literally opened my third eye. Since then, whenever I write, whenever I'm feeling creative, whenever really powerful ideas come to me, it starts. It started a couple of days ago when I was writing a section of my new book, and I know when it does it, I'm on the right route. And I believe that the sensations I'm feeling, and this is where it gets really intriguing, is that it's my pineal gland. The pineal gland sits equidistant from the center of your forehead to the back of your head. It sits in the dead center of the brain. It's the only organ, there are one or two other tiny organs, but it's the only organ in the brain that's not mirror imaged. Everything in the brain is mirror imaged. You have two hemispheres, you have two amygdala, you have two hippocampi, you've only got one pineal gland. The pineal gland sits in the center. The pineal gland is surrounded by crystals, very small crystals. It's something called pineal sand. These crystals are piezoelectric. Piezoelectric is crystals. If you press them, they give off an electric current. They give off electricity, they give off electromagnetic energy, or they can receive electromagnetic energy. Like when you were probably a kid and you had a crystal set. Your pineal gland is your radio receiver, and it can receive messages from somewhere else. It receives messages from something called the 0-point field. Not only that, I think that the Lucid Light device stimulates the pineal gland to generate a substance known as dimethyltryptamine. Dimethyltryptamine is the most powerful known hallucinogenic drug known to man. It occurs in plants, it's been found in the bloodstream of the body, it's been found in the urine, and they have now got evidence that it exists in the brain. We generate our own hallucinogenic drugs within the brain. These take us to places, these take us to other realities, realities that just sit very close to this one. And I think this is what mediums do. Mediums can generate this state automatically. And when they see things, they are attuning into alternate realities where they can attune into alternate truths. The difference is that ordinary people like myself, and I can't speak for yourself, can't do this naturally. When you take dimethyltryptamine, you can. Shamans do it all the time. People, when they go into deep hypnotic states, do it all the time. So clearly there is something here that is of great power. And again, I'm doing the science of it. My book, The Out of the Body Experience, does the science.
So this experience you had, would you say it was far greater than, say, a vivid dream that
totally different.
Have? But is it the same sort of thing happening in the brain, would you say, though?
Yes. Dreaming, yeah. In the book, I discuss lucid dreaming, which is the scenario when you are dreaming, you become conscious of the fact you are dreaming, and therefore can become part of your dream. You can't manipulate the dream, but you can do things within the dream. I think lucid dreaming is linked because lucid dreamers are not just dreaming. Because when you think about it, a dream is a three-dimensional recreation of reality inside your head that you walk within, you interface with other people, you can see other things. The question is, who's the person creating that dream for you? When I have a dream and I'm walking along the street and I turn a corner, there's suddenly a place there. It's been rendered and created by my mind, but I'm within it, but it's not created by me. So in other words, it is an alternate reality. I then discuss out-of-the-body experiences that people have where they actually claim they float outside of their body and they move around. I discuss sleep paralysis, where you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't move. And you sense that there's something else in the room. This can be all explained neurologically. It's to do with the release by the pineal gland of something called melatonin, which is another neurotransmitter. But what modern neurology doesn't explain is how we create these images. Where do they come from? We use the argument an hallucination. We can label an hallucination, but that doesn't mean we've explained it. You actually nail down a psychiatrist and say, when somebody has an hallucination, what are they seeing? Oh, well, they're just seeing confabulations. Well, what's a confabulation? Something created by the mind. Well, reality is created by the mind. You know, lest we forget, everything that we perceive is generated internally by the brain. So everything we perceive is an hallucination. It's just dreams or hallucinations that we don't share with other people. But there is evidence that people can share dreams. There's evidence that people share lucid dreams. There is an associate of mine, Robert Wagner, who's written the definitive book on lucid dreaming. And I strongly suggest anybody who's interested in this phenomenon get a hold of Robert's book. Watch the movie Inception. You know, this is the real deal. So what is happening is we're attuning into alternate realities. We're also attuning into realities that overlap on this one. When you wake up in the night and you dream and you think you've woken up, it's something called false awakenings. You think you've woken up, you go to the bathroom, you clean your teeth, bang, you're back in bed again. I did a program on BBC Radio Merseyside where a young guy from Birmingham phoned up. He had done that 8 times. 8 times he had woken up and he'd gone and he'd done things. And then he was back in bed. Every time he got a bit further through the day. The last time it happened, he got through to the mid-afternoon. And he was at work. And he looked out the window and he realised that it was dark and it was too early. Bang, he was back in bed again. This again is a known phenomenon. So where are we when we get up and we walk in our bedroom, a rendered recreation of our bedroom that seems so real, we don't even know we're dreaming.
What about the notion of remote viewing? How does that all fit in?
Remote viewing, I was quite disappointed in, to be honest. I had a whole chapter on remote viewing, and I was willing to believe that remote viewing does seem to be a very interesting phenomenon. And it is. But remote viewers think they are viewing things in this reality. They're not. That's why they never get things quite right. You know, for instance, if you look at the work of the major remote viewers, people like Ingo Swann, he always got things about 50 or 60% right. But there was 40% he got completely and utterly wrong. Now, if I'm in the position that I can remote view, Say, for instance, you're in your studio now, and you go into a remote viewing state, and you go into the room next door. If you are remote viewing,